Ellie Parker's life had always been a battle fought in silence. While Manhattan gleamed under the weight of wealth and ambition, Ellie cleaned its floors. She mopped the marble hallways where high-powered lawyers strutted in designer suits, clutching their briefcases like weapons. To them, she was invisible, a shadow, a ghost, but inside her chest burned a fire no one could extinguish. Once, she had dreamed of standing where they stood arguing cases, defending the helpless, changing lives. But dreams were expensive, and Ellie's life had been anything but privileged. Her mother Marie worked herself to the bone, sacrificing everything to give her daughter a chance at a better life. Then illness struck, stealing the little they had left, so Ellie gave up her scholarship, abandoned her dream of law school, and took the first job she could find, cleaning offices at night. Every night, as she polished the glass walls of Hunton Langford LLP, she whispered legal passages to herself from a tattered French law book. She wasn't just cleaning, she was learning, preparing, waiting. What she didn't know was that her moment was coming and it would change everything. The 42nd floor was quiet that night. The hum of the city below, a distant murmur. Ellie pushed her cleaning cart past the sleek glass offices, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished marble. She wore her usual uniform gray, worn at the edges, but her eyes, though tired, shone with determination. In the conference room, laughter erupted. The senior partners were celebrating a successful deal. Among them stood Alexander Hunt, the man they all feared and respected. Tall, sharp-suited, with eyes like ice. He was known for being brilliant, ruthless, and untouchable. As Ellie passed, the door suddenly opened. Alexander stepped out, his gaze sweeping over her and stopping. His eyes landed on the small French law book that had slipped from her cart. He bent down, picked it up, and held it between two fingers. "What's this?" he asked, his voice smooth but edged with mockery. "My book," Ellie replied calmly. Taking it from him, he smirked. A janitor reading French law, trying to impress someone. Her pride flared, but she kept her voice steady. "No, I read because I want to learn." His brow arched. "Interesting." He tilted his head, considering her for a moment, before saying, "Follow me." Inside the room, lawyers looked up, curious. Alexander tossed a contract onto the table. "Translate this," he said, his tone challenging. They chuckled. A janitor, translating a complex legal document. Impossible. But Ellie stepped forward, took the paper, and began to speak. Her voice was clear, her words flawless. When she reached the end, she added calmly, "This clause is incorrect. It exposes the firm to liability." Silence. The room froze. The laughter died. Alexander's piercing gaze locked on her, no longer mocking now, intrigued. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Ellie Parker." He smirked, almost too himself noted, as she walked out. Her heart pounded. She didn't know whether she had just made a fool of herself, or started something extraordinary. The next night, Ellie arrived at the 42nd floor, expecting things to be the same polish mop, leave. But the moment she stepped into the corridor, she felt it. Eyes watching her from behind the glass wall. Alexander Hunt stood with a cup of black coffee, his gaze fixed on her like a puzzle he intended to solve. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The intensity of his stare made her pause, heart fluttering with a mix of fear and something she didn't dare name. She forced herself to keep walking. 2 nights later, he called her into his office. "Miss Parker," he said, leaning back in his chair. His voice was calm, yet sharp enough to slice through the air. "Do you know what you did last night?" Ellie frowned. "I cleaned your floors." A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "You saved this firm from a multi-million-dollar mistake. Do you think that's nothing?" She crossed her arms. "I think I just did what anyone with knowledge would have done." His eyes glimmered with interest. "You have knowledge, most lawyers here don't. Where did you learn?" "My mother worked 2 jobs to put me through school. I had a scholarship to Columbia Law." Her voice trembled slightly, but she steadied it. "I had to give it up when she got sick." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something almost like empathy. Then, as quickly as it came, it vanished. "I'm offering you an apprenticeship," he said finally. "Work with me. Learn. Prove yourself." Ellie's heart raced. This was everything she wanted. Yet, her pride wouldn't let her say yes. "So, easily an unpaid apprenticeship?" she asked flatly. "It's an opportunity most would kill for." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Then give it to someone else. I don't beg for scraps." For the first time in years, Alexander Hunt was stunned into silence. No one ever talked to him like that. And yet, instead of anger, he felt respect. Over the following weeks, he watched her. Not overtly, just enough to see how she carried herself. She was fierce, unyielding, even when treated like she didn't belong. She read legal texts on her breaks, argued with herself in whispers as she studied clauses, and sometimes stayed long after her shift. Cleaning in silence with her headphones in, Alexander found himself lingering in his office longer than usual. Something about her presence stirred something buried deep inside him, something he had forgotten long ago. One night, as she was gathering her things, she found him standing by the window, staring out at the city. "You're still here?" she asked. He turned to her, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "Do you ever look at all those lights and wonder who else is still fighting?" Her chest tightened at the vulnerability in his tone. For a moment, he wasn't the ruthless CEO. He was just a man, haunted by something. "I think everyone's fighting something," she said quietly. Their eyes met, and in that shared silence, a spark ignited, fragile but undeniable. The next morning, she found a letter in her locker. Inside was a single line, written in neat, commanding handwriting. "You don't want scraps. Prove you deserve the whole table." Ellie couldn't help but smile. For the first time, she felt that her battle was truly beginning. Ellie Parker had never backed down from a challenge. So, when Alexander Hunt dared her to prove herself, she took it as a declaration of war. The next night, she arrived at the firm not with a mop, but with a folder of legal notes. During her breaks, she studied at the corner desk he had assigned her, though he never officially said she was his apprentice. It was as if he wanted her to fight for it, to earn it piece by piece. Every so often, she felt his gaze on her, sharp and assessing. The man was ice-controlled, unreadable. But the more she worked under his watch, the more she noticed the cracks in that cold facade. One evening, as she was reviewing a pro bono case file, Alexander approached. "You missed a clause," he said, his voice cutting. "If this goes to court, the opposing counsel will tear it apart." Ellie looked up, fire in her eyes. "No, I didn't miss it. I ignored it because it's irrelevant to the client's defense." His brow arched. "Irrelevant? Do you even understand what's at stake?" She stood, meeting his gaze head-on. "Yes, their life, not your reputation." For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. The tension between them crackled like electricity. Then, to her surprise, a slow smile spread across his lips. "Interesting argument," he said softly. "Prove me wrong." She did. The next day, she returned with a revised strategy, so airtight that even he had to admit it was brilliant. As days turned into weeks, their dynamic shifted. They worked late nights together, sometimes without speaking for hours. Yet the silence between them was no longer cold, it was charged. Alive. One night, as rain pattered softly against the glass, Ellie found him staring at the city again. "Do you ever sleep?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. He chuckled, a sound so rare it made her heart skip. "Not when there's work to be done." She walked closer, lowering her voice. "Or maybe you're just afraid to be alone with your thoughts." His smile faded, and for a moment, she saw the vulnerability he hid so well. "You're braver than most," he said quietly. "Most people don't dare talk to me that way." "Maybe they're scared," she replied. "But I'm not." Their eyes locked. Neither moved. Neither spoke. But something passed between them, something unspoken. Something dangerous. The next evening, Alexander found her asleep at her desk, her head resting on a pile of case files. A pen was still clutched in her hand. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her. Her face, usually fierce with determination, looked soft, almost fragile in sleep. Slowly, he draped his coat over her shoulders. She stirred slightly, murmuring his name in her sleep, and his chest tightened with something he couldn't name. When she woke, the coat was gone, but the warmth lingered. The next morning, Ellie found a note on her desk. In his elegant handwriting, it read, "You're stronger than you know. Don't stop." For the first time, she smiled, not because she had won a battle, but because she felt seen. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Ellie and Alexander had found a strange rhythm. She challenged him, and he challenged her back. Late nights turned into shared moments, and their silences began to speak volumes. But fragile, things break easily, and in their world, enemies were always watching. It started with whispers. "She's only here because she's sleeping with him," a voice sneered in the break room. She's just a janitor pretending to be a lawyer. Another laughed. Ellie overheard them one night as she collected files. Her heart clenched, but she kept walking, her expression unreadable. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. When Alexander heard about the rumors, his temper flared. "Who started this?" he demanded during a meeting, his voice like a blade. The room fell silent. No one dared answer. That night, he found Ellie on the rooftop, sitting alone, the city lights painting her face in gold and shadow. "They're wrong," he said softly behind her. She didn't turn around. "Are they? Because it feels like I don't belong here." Alexander stepped closer, his voice firm. "You belong more than anyone. Don't let them decide who you are." Ellie turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Then why does it still hurt?" For a long moment, he didn't know what to say. Instead, he sat beside her, letting the silence hold them both. As the night deepened, the vulnerability between them grew impossible to ignore. "You think I'm cold," Alexander said suddenly, his voice low. Ellie looked at him, startled. "I think you're guarded." He gave a bitter smile. "I've lost too much to let anyone close. But you make me want to try." Her breath caught. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, that his walls didn't scare her, that she saw the man behind them. But before she could speak, the moment was interrupted by a buzzing phone. His expression hardened instantly. "I have to take this." And just like that, the ice returned. The next day, things got worse. A new face walked into the firm: Isabella Monroe, Alexander's ex, and a powerful attorney known for her manipulations. Her smile was sweet, but her eyes were full of venom. "Still rescuing lost causes, Alex," she said smoothly, her gaze landing on Ellie. "How adorable." Ellie bit back her anger, but Isabella wasn't done. She leaned close to Alexander, whispering loud enough for Ellie to hear. "Careful. When you mix with the dirt, it sticks." The words cut deep, but Ellie walked away, her head held high. She wouldn't let Isabella see her bleed. That night, Ellie avoided Alexander. She buried herself in work, refusing to meet his eyes. He noticed Ellie, he said finally, cornering her in the hallway. "What's going on?" She glared at him, her voice trembling. "You let her humiliate me. You said I belonged here, but you let her. I was protecting the deal." "And who's protecting me?" she snapped, tears welling up. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "I thought I was." Ellie stepped back, her voice breaking. "Then maybe you're not who I thought you were." She left early that night, her heart aching. Alexander watched her go, his chest tight with something he couldn't name: fear, anger, regret. Standing alone in his office, he whispered to the empty room, "Don't walk away from me, Ellie." But she already had. The days that followed felt colder, even though the summer sun burned outside. Ellie and Alexander passed each other in the halls like strangers. He buried himself in work, his jaw clenched, his voice clipped during meetings. She did the same, focusing on her cases, avoiding his gaze. But every time their eyes met, it was like a storm brewing, silent, electric, impossible to ignore. Ellie's heart was a battlefield. Part of her wanted to believe in him, in the man who had shown her his vulnerability that night on the rooftop. But another part whispered that maybe she was just a pawn, a distraction, a challenge he wanted to conquer. Meanwhile, Alexander fought his own war. He wanted to protect her, to pull her close and tell her the truth, that she mattered to him more than any deal, more than the firm, more than anything. But years of building walls around his heart made it impossible to say the words. Instead, he watched her from afar, his heart aching with every step she took away from him. As if the tension between them wasn't enough. Isabella lurked like a serpent, her presence poisoning the air. "She's not like us, Alex," Isabella purred one evening in his office. "She'll drag you down." Alexander's eyes went cold. "Leave her out of this, Isabella." But Isabella smirked, leaning closer. "You can't protect her. You never could protect the ones you love." The words sliced through him like a knife, reopening wounds he thought had healed long ago. He slammed the door behind her, rage boiling in his chest. While rumors spread and the pressure mounted, Ellie carried a burden no one knew. Her mother's health was failing. The hospital bills were piling up. She worked double shifts, skipped meals, and sold whatever she could to cover the costs. One night, Alexander found her asleep at her desk again, dark circles under her eyes. He wanted to wake her, to ask what was wrong, to fix it all, but he stopped himself. She had made it clear she didn't want his help. Instead, he left a cup of coffee and a note. You don't have to fight alone. When she woke, tears filled her eyes. She kept the note in her pocket, close to her heart. Just when things seemed like they couldn't get worse, disaster struck. A crucial deal collapsed, costing the firm millions. Fingers pointed everywhere, and somehow, the blame found its way to Ellie. She leaked the documents. Someone whispered, "She's sabotaging the firm." Another accused. Alexander knew it was a lie. He knew she was innocent, but instead of defending her publicly, he stayed silent, torn between protecting her and protecting the company. For Ellie, that silence was the final betrayal. That night, she packed her things. Alexander caught her at the elevator. His voice, "Course, don't go." She turned, tears glistening in her eyes. "Why should I stay? You don't trust me." "I do." "Then why didn't you say anything?" she cried, her voice trembling. His jaw tightened, his voice low. "Because if I defend you, they'll come after you harder." "I'm trying to protect you, Ellie." She shook her head. "You're protecting your pride, not me." The elevator doors closed between them, leaving Alexander staring at his own reflection, feeling as if he had lost something he could never replace. That night, Alexander stood alone in his office, staring at the city lights, his chest aching with regret. For the first time in years, the man who had built his empire on control felt completely powerless. Ellie's world grew quieter after she walked away from Hunt and Langford. The skyscrapers that once felt like a challenge now loomed over her like cold monuments to a dream she had almost touched. She found part-time work at a small legal aid center, helping tenants and immigrants with their cases. It didn't pay much, but it gave her something her old job never had: peace. Or so she thought. Days blurred into nights. Ellie split her time between the center and caring for her mother, whose health was declining faster than she could manage. Hospital visits became routine, bills stacked on the kitchen table like an unspoken threat. Despite everything, Ellie kept fighting. She stayed strong for her mother, forcing a smile every morning, even when her own heart felt hollow. But at night, when the house was silent, she would hold Alexander's note, "You don't have to fight alone," and wonder if she had made the right choice by leaving. Meanwhile, Alexander's world was crumbling. The failed deal had left the firm vulnerable, and whispers of sabotage grew louder. Investors pulled back, clients hesitated, and within the chaos, Isabella struck like a predator. "You're losing control, Alex," she purred, during a board meeting. "Maybe it's time you step down." He stared at her, his voice low and lethal. "You're behind this, aren't you?" Isabella's smile was poison. "Prove it." Every instinct screamed that she had orchestrated the collapse, but without evidence, he was trapped. Worse, he couldn't stop thinking about Ellie, wondering if she was safe, if she hated him, if she ever thought of him at all. One rainy evening, as Ellie left the legal aid center, a black car followed her down the empty street. She quickened her pace, clutching her bag tighter. The car sped up. Panic surged through her chest. Suddenly, the driver swerved, narrowly missing her before disappearing into the night. Heart pounding, she stumbled onto the sidewalk, breathless. It was no accident. Someone wanted to scare her, or worse. That night, Ellie sat by her mother's bedside, shaking. For hours, she debated whether to call him. Finally, with trembling hands, she dialed Alexander's number. He answered on the first ring. "Ellie." His voice was rough, almost desperate. I think someone's following me," she whispered. The line went silent for a moment. Then his voice hardened. "Where are you? Don't move, I'm coming." Minutes later, his car screeched to a halt in front of her house. When he stepped out, his suit was drenched from the rain, his face pale with fury and fear. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You're safe now," he murmured against her hair. "I won't let anyone hurt you." For the first time in weeks, Ellie let herself break, sobbing into his chest. All the anger, all the pain, melted away in the warmth of his embrace. That night, Alexander stayed by her side. As she slept, he sat by the window, making calls, gathering evidence, and piecing together the puzzle. By dawn, his investigators confirmed what he already suspected: the black car was rented under Isabella's name. She had crossed the line. When Ellie woke, Alexander was still there. His eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but burning with resolve. "I'm going to end this," he said, his voice steady. "She's not going to hurt you. Not again. Not ever." Ellie looked at him, her heart aching with everything they had left unsaid. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. He met her gaze, his expression raw. "Because I love you, Ellie. I should have said it sooner. I should have fought harder. But I'm saying it now. I love you." Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to say the words back, but her voice trembled too much to speak. Instead, she reached for his hand and held it tightly. The next few days were a blur of movement and strategy. Alexander was no longer just a CEO fighting for his company. He was a man fighting for the woman he loved. He moved like a storm, gathering evidence, calling in favors, and tightening the net around Isabella. In his office, Alexander stood over a table littered with files, phone records, and photographs. George, his trusted assistant, entered quietly. "Sir, the investigators confirmed everything," George said. "The rental car, the payments to the driver, the surveillance footages, all tied to Isabella." Alexander's jaw clenched. "Good. Prepare everything for the police. And George," his voice dropped to a cold, dangerous tone, "make sure she sees it coming." 2 nights later, Isabella arrived at an upscale restaurant, dressed in her usual elegance. She smirked when she saw Alexander waiting at a private table. "Alex," she purred, sliding into the seat across from him. "Finally came to your senses." He didn't return the smile. Instead, he placed a folder on the table. "I know what you did." Isabella's expression faltered for a split second. "What are you talking about?" He opened the folder, revealing photographs, contracts, and signed witness statements. "You sabotaged the company. You tried to kill Ellie. You underestimated me, Isabella." Her eyes narrowed, venom flashing. "You'll never prove it." Alexander leaned forward, his voice like steel. "I already have. The police are waiting." Outside, Isabella froze as officers entered the restaurant. The color drained from her face as they read her rights and handcuffed her. She turned to Alexander, her voice shrill. "You can't do this to me. You loved me once." He stood, his eyes cold. "I stopped loving you the moment you betrayed me. Now, you'll face justice." As the officers led her away, the restaurant fell silent. Alexander exhaled slowly, his chest burning with both triumph and rage. After the arrest, Alexander drove straight to Ellie's house. She opened the door, her expression wary until she saw the softness in his eyes. "It's over," he said quietly. "She can't hurt you anymore." Ellie's breath caught. You did this for me. For you. For us," he said, stepping closer. "Ellie, I don't care about the company, the money, the power. None of it means anything without you. I've spent my life building walls, but you tore them down. You made me feel alive again." Tears filled her eyes as he took her hands in his. "I love you," he whispered. "I will never stop fighting for you." Her voice trembled, but her heart was steady. "I love you too, Alex." That night, they sat together under the quiet glow of the stars, their hands intertwined. There were no more walls, no more distance, just our hearts finally beating in unison. The city seemed different the next morning. The air felt lighter, the sky brighter, as if even Manhattan had exhaled with relief. For the first time in months, Ellie woke up without fear. She stretched, feeling the warmth of sunlight across her face, and found Alexander in the kitchen, awkwardly making coffee. She leaned against the doorframe, smiling softly. "You know, for someone who runs a company, you're terrible at this." He glanced over his shoulder, a rare grin tugging at his lips. "I'm learning." "For you." For a moment, it felt so simple, to people sharing an ordinary morning, as if the chaos outside their walls had never existed. In the weeks that followed, Ellie returned to Hunton Langford not as a janitor, not as someone seeking approval, but as a legal associate, under her own merit. Her passion and brilliance caught everyone's attention. Even those who had whispered behind her back now watched in awe. Alexander stood proudly by her side, never interfering, letting her shine, on her own terms. At meetings, he would glance at her across the table, admiration hidden behind his usual stoic expression. But Ellie felt it every time. Late at night, when the office was empty, they would sit together, reviewing cases, and sharing quiet moments that no one else saw. They were no longer CEO and employee. They were partners. One evening, Ellie visited her mother's grave, flowers in hand. Alexander stood beside her silently, his presence steady and comforting. "Mom," Ellie whispered, kneeling down, "I did it. I fought, and I found someone who fights for me too." Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "She'd be proud of you." Ellie looked up at him, her eyes shimmering. I think she would have liked you. He smiled faintly. I hope so. Their love grew slowly, naturally, through laughter, through small gestures, through the quiet understanding that they had survived the worst together. The world still watched them, some with curiosity, others with envy, but none of it mattered. One rainy evening, as they walked home under a single umbrella, Ellie laughed, her hair damp from the storm. You always look so serious, she teased. And you, he said, brushing a raindrop from her cheek, always find a way to make me forget why. Under the rain, he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion, alone it was a promise. Months later, the company thrived under their leadership. Ellie became a beacon of inspiration, leading charity projects and defending those who had no voice. Alexander, once cold and untouchable, found himself smiling more, laughing more, living more. One evening, as the sun set over the city, he led her to the garden terrace of the firm. The sky burned with shades of orange and gold. Ellie, he said, his voice trembling with sincerity. The first time I proposed something to you, it was for the wrong reason. Tonight, I'm doing it for the only reason that matters. He knelt, pulling out a velvet box. Inside, a diamond sparkled under the fading light. I love you. I want to spend my life proving it. Will you marry me? Ellie's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Yes, Alexander, 1,000 times yes. Their wedding was simple, intimate, filled with people who truly mattered. As they exchanged vows, there were no whispers, no doubts, only love so real, it silenced everything else. That night, under the stars of Manhattan, they danced slowly, holding each other close. You changed my life, she whispered. And you saved mine, he replied. Years later. Ellie Parker Hunt stood in her own law office, her name etched proudly on the door. She had fought her way here, not through shortcuts or favors, but through courage and determination. Alexander entered, his tie loosened, his smile soft, ready to go home. He asked. She walked to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. Home is wherever you are. Under the glow of the city, they shared a kiss, proof that even in a world of power and ambition, love could not only survive but flourish. Because love is not a game, it's a verdict, and theirs was forever.